Hey, this is Shane Greer, co-owner and co-publisher of Campaigns and Elections, back for another Campaign Insider, this time with Janet Katowitz of Sage Media Planning and Placement. As always, we have to thank our sponsor, Publicity Research, for opinion research on politics and public policy. We are here today, though, to talk about media buying. And actually, recently, you and I were having breakfast, and you were joking, but probably serious, that you would never hire me because I have 0 TVs in my house, and just not a good fit for media planning. But there's a serious point in that, which is I'd love to get into a little bit, which, as a media buyer, you talked about the value of really understanding programming, understanding what's on. Can you speak to that and speak to the importance of having that kind of relationship with programming?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me, first of all. And part of our interview process is, do you watch TV? Because frequently we're called upon.
I'm out the door. Immediately I'm
Or if you've got the wrong favorite character of a show, many things will get you out the door. But pretty much we're interested in assessing whether or not you can figure out who is the audience for a program. Many of the programs we're asked to match audiences with are just premiering in the fall, 60 days before an election. So if someone doesn't really have an appreciation for who the audience is, it's going to put them at a disadvantage. So we are interested in hiring people who are pop culture conversant and who watch TV, who are, of this world.
And just diving into that a little bit, because I find it fascinating, is, obviously you've got such a range of choices of programming, right? And you might be, some folks, myself, love Game of Thrones. Some people just aren't into it. As a media buyer, how important is it that you kind of have a really broad range of programming interests? Because, it's one thing, you might hate shows like Law and Order or whatever, right? But understanding who's watching those shows, how much of that is actually having an appreciation for the programming itself?
Well, I think, and this is one of the sort of myths right now about linear media buyers, is that, it's all about the programming and it's not about data. And we're very wedded to empirical data. So pretty much you're looking for audiences, just like you are with any other kind of targetable medium. So if my target is non-college men over 40, I'm looking for programs that perform well, and that will come through the Nielsen ratings data or whatever ratings data you use. And with the advent of cable providers their set-top box data is being folded into ratings data. You can go very deep in trying to match your audience with the program. So we let the data drive which programs we're selecting, but it is helpful to know, sort of have an understanding of what program is going to perform in what audience.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's the perfect segue into the kind of the data and analytics side of things, which is, you talked about Nielsen and so on. From your perspective, when you're, making those sort of decisions, what is the best data to be using? What do you rate really highly comes to matching your candidate ad, for example, with exactly the right audience?
Right. So as with most answers to political questions, it depends. Yep. But when it comes to TV and cable, we are looking at Nielsen, and they have increased their sample size dramatically because the data is really representative of each market. And TV viewing is very idiosyncratic. You can't really model what the local news viewer in Pittsburgh is watching off of Cleveland. They're just too different. There's too many variables. So we were very interested in data that is local. So Nielsen provides that in abundance, and we also use some of their tools that let us drill down to geography and demography. So we're very rarely buying against a whole media market. We're buying usually against the district zip codes, and then a demographic filter laid on top of that. So if the polling tells us our target is women over 50, we're looking at women over 50 in that district, not the whole market.
We've also talked before, and I'd love to get into the other side of kind of data and analytics, which is the measurement side. And there's, this long-standing debate between kind of digital and linear TV. And, of course, really it's about the right mix of medium to reach your audience ultimately, rather than silos. But one of the challenges when, whether we're talking about, digital or TV or direct mail or radio or you name it, there's everything has different metrics of measurement, and it's difficult, therefore, I think sometimes to be able to compare and contrast and really get meaningful insights out of it. How are you measuring, like what are your go-to stats when it comes to measuring the performance of advertising on TV, and how do you see that evolve? I mean, just one thing to touch on, Roku, for example, we know that, Roku, and also is it Vizio, with some of their platforms where they're using pixel matching to be able to say that actually this ad was shown at this time, and so on.
Right.
What are the analytics you're using to measure, and how do you see that evolving in the cycle or cycles ahead?
Right. So, I mean, honestly, we rely mainly on the polling as we go because, TV ratings data the overnights are based on unrepresentative markets, and you're just not going to get that level of granularity that you want looking for that kind of data. So it's really just the tracking polling that tells us, are we moving? And whereas with digital, and we don't just buy linear media. We're not really big believers in siloing, because really the object is to follow the voter from screen to screen to screen. And ultimately, I think, all kinds of buying is going to converge. We don't really, all of our buyers are conversant in sort of all manner.
It's eyeballs.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And or eardrums, and because radio is actually holding up pretty well, as a matter of fact. So we're really, you can kind of get obsessed over, how many impressions were delivered, whatever, but the quality of the engagement really matters, and we feel like that shows up best in the polling, in the particular of your campaign, and so that's really what we rely on. That's not to say we don't get reports back, when we're placing digital, but it's really, the proof is, hey, did we move a lot of people in a short period of time based on our message delivery?
One thing when we look at sort of campaigns up and down the ballot, and you're looking for a media buyer, what are the questions that a smart client is asking when they're making the determination? What are the kind of questions that should be asked of you as a media buyer to really get at the quality of the service that you're offering, say, versus a competitor?
Well, we're big believers also in transparency. I know that there's, sometimes the knock on media consultants is, there's so much money and there's an incentive to tell folks to spend money, even if maybe it's not in the best interest of the campaign. That's really not been my experience at all. That more often than not, the consultants are saying, asking the question, is this the best use of your money? What is the cost per voter impression for any medium that we're, looking to spend? So part of it is transparency. Show us what we're getting for our money. What is the thinking that went behind the selection? We do an analysis of a district and a market before we start buying, which is, let's look at the viewing patterns in that district and then make sure our buy reflects the patterns of the district, not of the market. And I think that's probably the biggest place where buyers fall down. They're buying against market-wide data, and the differences can be quite dramatic. So I think it's transparency. How did you arrive here? All of us grew up pretty much watching TV. It's not that hard to understand. So if your target is women and the schedule that your buyer sends you is just overrun with sporting events, you should question that. This stuff should make sense. Yeah. So it isn't, it's not rocket science. It's really that there are just a lot of balls in the air at one time, and can you juggle, not let anything drop?
Well, Janet Katowitz of Sage Media Planning and Placement, thank you very much for joining us on Campaign Insider. Thanks again, as always, to our sponsor, Royalty Research, for opinion research on politics and public policy. Do, of course, check out our other videos on the C&E Facebook page and at campaignselections.com on the video page. Janet, thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.